stuff that's happened this week in the world of, I don't know, whatever those crazy nut job kids out there, the social justice warriors are doing. Mr. Swift, how are you doing?
I am doing outstanding, Mr. Coughlin. How are you doing?
I can't complain too much, just kind of glancing over everything here from Internet News in America. Some of these top stories we got from the past week of these nut jobs, usually Hollywood types or people that think that it's okay to, I don't know, hire furries to come speak at Google, but heaven forbid if you think that a marginal tax rate of 50% is too high. I mean, So let's start off with story number one here I'm looking at. Rosie O'Donnell is aghast by the idea of Americans keeping more of their money, and she tried to bribe, that's right, bribe Republicans not to vote for a tax cut.
Yeah. So,
she lost her mind.
Yeah, I mean, really, where to begin on this one? Rosie O'Donnell, I think, is pretty much the epitome of the Hollywood liberal elitist. The kind of person who's always rallying on behalf of the common American, even though she is a multimillionaire who knows absolutely nothing about what it's like to actually be struggling as a worker.
It's kind of astonishing that she just keeps saying things that are objectively stupid, and she says them in a way that she herself is just woefully underintelligent for these discussions. She goes up against Ben Shapiro and thinks she's going to do well, and she just looks stupid. And yet, somebody, her handlers, whomever, people that are presumably making money off of her, they still let this woman have a public platform. It's kind of baffling.
Yeah, but it's been going on forever. I mean, she's hardly an aberration. There are more people like that out in the Hollywood media industrial elite complex that really she's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, everybody's doing this. Everybody's a virtue signaler. Everybody is trying to, use their entertainment platform to sway public policy. So, I mean, it's dumb, but it's hardly, outside of, the normal protocol for what's going on in the liberal side of the equation these days.
It's funny, that really transitions well and ties into actually probably the biggest story from the past couple of days of Hollywood, which is that Mr. Social Justice Warrior himself, one of the smuggest, most arrogant, condescending, woke human beings who's ever lived, Aziz Ansari, was accused of inappropriate sexual conduct. And everybody and their mother probably saw him being a creep is an inevitability. Is he like the biggest loser in all this because he didn't even really do anything wrong, but he's still going to get tarred and feathered?
Well, it's one of those things where we're really seeing the cannibalization of the left nowadays. Jim Goad wrote a really great article right before the 2016 presidential election where he said, kind of the story of the Obama administration on a sort of sociocultural level was the slow degradation of racial relations in America. So by the time 2016 rolled around, things were just completely fractured and fragmented, and it became a huge ideological fault line. So anyway, in the article Mr. Goad wrote, he basically implied that with Clinton under the helm, we would see kind of the same thing happen to gender relations over the next couple of years, to where each becomes sort of weaponized and used as a sort of political cudgel. And the thing about the left, and I've been seeing this for years, it's not exactly a new phenomenon, is that they're trying to gather so many divergent and, to be frank, incompatible groups under the same umbrella to take on this amorphous blob of the white patriarchy. So you're going to have guys who are completely ideologically incompatible. You're going to have, guys that are, hardcore, hardline Islamic adherents, and you're also going to have radical LGBT proponents. And those two just completely can't gel. The logic isn't there. Their way of seeing the world is just completely different. And basically, what's happening is the tent pole can't hold itself. You can't be like the Noah's Ark of progressivism. And I think what we're seeing is slowly but surely sort of that cannibalization, where we're seeing the fractured, feminist contingent slowly devouring the male contingent of the liberal side, because there's not a whole lot of use for them. So I think really more than anything, we're actually kind of seeing the fracturing of the liberal demographic on this one, to where right now we're kind of positing females as the great cultural victim who should have more power. And that means that the males inside the liberal contingent are going to have to involuntarily step aside. So I think it's just another example of the left eating its own tail, so to speak.
Do you think that the rise, though, of Trump will probably stave that off, like their decline for a few years, because they'll have that common enemy? And let's be honest, if you could draw up the modern-day left's most perfect villain, it would be the big, kind of overweight, loudmouth, rich womanizer who doesn't like the immigrants. It's like Trump is a perfect totem for them to all attack at the same time. But yeah, once they do get that power back, it starts to deteriorate because there is no actual central tenet that holds them all together. At least on the right, on some level, the Religious Freedom Caucus and the Financial Freedom Caucus have this underlying principle of just, I want my freedom from things type of deal. So, and the left really just doesn't seem to have anything like that these days.
It's amazing how soon people forget things that happened just 10 years ago. I mean, everything that we're seeing with Trump and the reaction from the left, we already saw it with George W. Bush. I mean, the exact same thing where you had everybody, hating on Bush for being the exemplar of white privilege, this billionaire Texas oil guy who somehow lived in Connecticut and still pretends to be a Southern guy, who was accused of hating immigrants, hating women, hating black people. I mean, this has all been done before. This is just a remake of that going on in different terms. So
yeah, I was thinking about that as far as the one thing they started talking about when this nutjob psychiatrist from Yale started yammering on about Trump not being mentally fit was that she violated the Goldwater rule, which prohibits, it's an ethical guideline within the psychiatric profession, prohibiting them from diagnosing basically public figures they haven't interviewed, because all these psychiatrists tried to slander and defame, I should say, Barry Goldwater as being this, in 1964, as being this out-of-touch, dangerous maniac who could have his finger on the button at any time. And I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. And then if you think about Ronald Reagan, oh, he was really stupid, and he was crazy, and he was going to kill us all with the next Cold War, that's going to start the Cold War with the USSR. And there was George W. Bush. He's really stupid and dangerous and starting all these wars, and he's a cowboy and all this stuff. And now it's Trump. And while I do think that Trump is a great deal crazier than those others, it's kind of a classic case of boy who cried wolf, and we're also seeing that this wolf ain't that bad.
yeah, I really want to record like all of the reactions from guys like Bill Maher and John Oliver talking about how Trump is absolutely the worst thing that's ever happened to American politics. He's a complete and total dictator and a tyrant. And then save that for 12 years down the road when they're saying the exact same thing about whoever the next Republican president's going to be. I mean, it's just the same story being told over and over again. And the thing is, and I think it's really problematic for the left because this isn't 2006 anymore. You don't have Barack Obama waiting in the wings. You don't have that great, well, in this case, half-white hope there to deliver you from the evil boogeyman that you've been, condemning for the last 8 years. So instead of actually building up a real challenger to Donald Trump, or actually forming some sort of like overarching political tenet that they can rally the voters behind, they're just spending so much time and effort trying to just slander Trump and paint his supporters as racist and deplorable and other things that is actually not really setting them up well at all for 2020.
Yeah, it's and again, I think they're going to have huge gains this year in the midterms, if for no other reason than every party that's not in power tends to gain during midterms with a president, and Trump he's got his flaws here, but I think there's kind of this like psychic reaction that's happening from the elite class in America, in that this is the first time since the 70s that basically a Bush or a Clinton hasn't been running things. Like even when Obama was president, Hillary was still there as Secretary of State, and everybody knew she was going to be next. And obviously before her was Bush, and then there was Clinton, and then there's Bush, and Bush was there was Reagan. And for the first time, these people who have had all this power and Washington, D.C., who've had access to everybody and everything, are seeing Trump come in, and it's not just an outsider. It's the most boorish outsider possible, and a man who has no Washington connection, to almost nobody that he's connected to or associated with is really a Washington guy at all. Like, even the most popular people he has in his cabinet, like Rex Tillerson, a CEO, General Kelly was a general, Rex Mattis was a general. Like, he's not really taking in a lot of people from in that Beltway area, and I think a lot of them are revolting against that, and I think it's spelling out through a lot of the media as well.
Yeah, that's kind of the turd in the punch bowl. Everybody forgets that the classical, elitist, traditional Republican base hates Trump just as much, if not more, than the Democrats. I mean, this is a guy who literally came in there with a wrecking ball and just completely took over the party from the inside. So he basically took like all of their policies, and let's face it, Republicans and Democrats, they're both leaning towards a sort of neoliberalistic, globalistic sort of mentality. We're seeing that they're both advocating open borders, open trade. Their global international policies are pretty much the same at this point. And I think Donald Trump and his platform is a threat to both of their international designs. I think clearly he's someone who, for at least 4 years anyway, has really sort of maybe not sort of held back the tide of progress or regress or whatever you want to call it, but I just think he's made it a more sort of dynamic experience. I think this could have larger after effects down the line than we think. And at the end of the day, I mean, you can complain about the small things, but the important thing is what he won the election on. And you got to remember, Donald Trump won the election by getting Democratic states to switch to Republican. He turned blue-red. The single most important issue and what got him elected was the economy, because Democrats were focusing more on gender issues and virtue signaling and the Hillary Clinton platform, and not actual hard, job creation, economic nationalistic issues. Donald Trump did, and I got to look at the Dow. We're hitting numbers we haven't seen since the 1990s. This is a huge boom. In short, you can say what you feel about Trump, but the fact of the matter is, his economic promises, he's delivered. And when 2020 rolls around, that would be the absolute worst nightmare scenario for the Democrats. How do you explain that?
Yeah, that's the thing about Trump is that, I'm always a big believer that Trump always wins. I don't really always understand why things are happening or why they're working, but he always does win. I like that he's showing. I think his international policy, his foreign policy, is just outstanding. I think his approach to things has been. I'm a little nervous about North Korea, of course, but even there, he's got North Korea back to the table. They're talking to South Korea. They're not doing anything. I can't really think they're ever going to attack us, and they're backing down. China's giving more sanctions against them. We're seeing NATO's been paying more of their fair share. We're taking money away from Palestine. We're taking money away from Pakistan. Like, he's actually reining in a lot of this baloney foreign aid. And it turns out all these people kept saying for all these years, if you do this, there's going to be a big reaction. If you can't do this, it'll be too destabilizing. And he's just doing it. And it turns out, oh no, actually, the world will just go along with us because we are really that big. Like, Donald Trump is a guy that, for good or for bad, he understands how to use power. He knows what power is. And so he's got this power, and he's probably looking around at everything going, why are we doing this? We're the United States. That's El Salvador. We should have a better trading deal with them. They need us more than we need them. And he's using that power to some effect internationally. And domestically, I can't discount the social issues that have arisen. I think my great prediction will be that in 2019, abortion will be, Roe v. Wade will be overturned. I just think there's something gigantic coming that way to really put a fine point on all this. But those things will gin up a lot of hate from both sides. But results, this stuff works. It's not enough just to say, as a conservative, well, I like tax cuts because it helps the economy. Well, then don't be surprised when it actually helps the economy. And I think that that's what's going to happen. It's going to bear out that, oh, shoot, that works. Now, whether he gets a credit for it because of his personality, I don't know. But I do think that people will look around and go, oh, shoot, I really do have more money. Like, I have noticeably more money right now, and there's more jobs being created, and that means that there's more demand for labor. So I have even more money on top of that, and they're going to sit there and go, well, North Korea didn't blow up, and I have more money. It's really easy to vote for Trump, especially if Trump settles down and doesn't, insult an ethnic group in the last year or so. I think he might just walk. Yeah, might get reelected.
When you really look back on it, I think the history books are going to reflect on this a little bit more than we have now. We're just a year away from all this stuff. Is that the 2016 election really wasn't about the Democratic mores versus the Republican values, or women versus men, or whites versus minorities, all the things that have been hammered over our head for the last year. I mean, it really was a case of economic nationalism versus globalization. And globalization, people forget, that's the big overarching story. That's the thing that's guiding the 21st century. That's the big story about what we're going to be. Are we going to be an interconnected global economic system, or are we going to stay the course and just kind of be nationalistic and keep the trade the way it is? And I think 2016, if for at least a few years, was a resounding victory for the old guard. That, we're not going to completely fall in line with this European Union style of, international interdependence. We're not quite there yet. We just want to kind of keep the way things are. And that's going to be a huge thing, probably a bigger factor, I think, in 2020 than 2016. I mean, you really can't predict what's going to happen in the next couple of years. But just look at the way America's doing. Look at the economy. That we're doing this thing where we're staying a little bit more isolationist in terms of financial policy. We're staying out of foreign affairs. I mean, say what you will about the so-called Muslim ban where nobody actually got banned. Here's the thing. Barack Obama, this late into his first term of office, was like blowing up Muslims. I mean, he was killing brown children left and right through airstrikes. Donald Trump, to the best of my knowledge, has done one airstrike. That's it over the course of a year. He's not very hawkish. I mean, he's doing the stuff with North Korea, but that's just, just barbing over Twitter, and that's nothing really substantial. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be a very, very important topic moving forward. And we're going to see over the next couple of years exactly where we want to be in terms of international policy. Domestic policy, things really haven't changed that much since the 60s. The same issues keep going back and forth. But international policy, that's why you have the executive office. I mean, that's why you have a president, is to deal with these foreign affairs and, kind of be that face of the world. See where America fits in the big global order. And I think Trump, more so than any president since, I'm going to say maybe even Woodrow Wilson, is kind of redefining what that means.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say that America's foreign policy is seem to have a dramatic turn. It does seem like we're less involved in things than before on some level, although it's really difficult for me to make too much of a judgment on that because we are still involved in the Middle East. And although that said, he's also showing again that policies, this isn't all theoretical. Everybody's always like, take the shackles off the military, and he does. And within 6 months, ISIS has been defeated, completely gone. It turns out that there really was no need to drag this out. You just, okay, we're just going to end it. I think that's the Trump brain. Again, good or bad, there are downsides to this. But he just goes, well, if we're going to do it, just go 100%. And I think that's why people don't want to, I can't imagine North Korea test them because they know Trump isn't going to do, like if you drop a nuke on us, if there's Obama, you might not get a nuke in return. You might get a conventional attack. You might not get a nuke. You know for a fact that Donald Trump will launch every nuke he has, and we will turn all Pyongyang, not Pyongyang, all Pyongyang into glass if need be. He may seem crazy, but he's also dangerous in their eyes. And hey, he's our crazy, dangerous guy, and that's why we can get what we want.
Well, North Korea is just, a pimple on the backside of humanity at this point. Right now, they're just kind of playing the appeasement game. I think give it, 20 years, there's going to be an all-out attack on Korea. North Korea's going to get vanquished, and they'll be reunified with South Korea. I think that's probably more likely under Democratic leadership, though. I just got that feeling that that's going to be, something depending on the U.S.'s relationship with Japan, I think, will be the driver there. I could see North Korea far more likely to attack Japan than the U.S. That I think would be a much, much more obvious foregone conclusion than the U.S. being targeted. And of course, the U.S. and Japan are allies. So if anything happens, the hammer goes down. So I think that's probably the bigger, more pressing issue that the media is probably not really touching upon at this point.
No, because see, the media is far too busy getting their panties in a bunch over a child of African descent wearing a T-shirt that said "coolest monkey in the jungle."
Or even better yet, the actual headline for CNN, I was checking on it a minute ago, was Donald Trump is overweight and doesn't exercise enough. That was like their headline, their top story. The most important thing in the world they could be discussing was the president being fat and not doing enough crunches.
I mean, that's incredible. If they're doing that sincerely, when it was obviously the story coming out of Trump's little physical there was a doctor saying, actually, he scored 30 out of 30 on this cognitive test, which is perfect. So he's actually in perfect mental health. And he's in great shape. And when they asked, how is that possible, given that he supposedly eats all these Big Macs and everything, the doctor just said he's got great genetics. So all we really learned today was Donald Trump is mentally perfect and that he's actually genetically superior to all of us. But if CNN wants to say that he's overweight, sure, go ahead, guys. Just frame it that way. Just keep digging your hole. You're going to look dumber and dumber because it's just not true. And that makes all the stuff that Trump does, which is genuinely crazy at times, it all seems like it's part of your made-up crap. You're just killing your own credibility.
Yeah, and meanwhile we have, Olympic-level athletes dying at 31. So, who knows?
Yeah, sometimes 31-year-olds just die. They don't all have the genetics of Trump. It's just a shame, really.
He's a stout boy, I'll give him that.
Did you see where these millennials are getting upset by the old sitcom Friends?
I've read that obliquely, but I'm not in the loop, so you got to fill me in with the details here. But what explicitly upsets them about this old program?
Yeah, I guess some of these millennials are watching shows like Friends, and I can't imagine they ever saw Seinfeld, what would happen. But they're watching Friends, and it's not woke, of course, because it was a TV show in the friggin' 90s. And, of course, when Friends came out, it was the most vanilla, bland humor. I mean, it was fine. It was a funny show and all. But it was hardly controversial or anything like that. But I guess there's a number of jokes in that are problematic. Problematic, the dumbest word in the English lexicon right now. But they're seen as sexist and transphobic and all these other things, which, of course, when you live in a world where Aziz Ansari is a rapist, yeah, I guess you would think that Chandler and Monica was an inappropriate relationship or something like that. The rest of us are just going to look at this generation and weep into our hands knowing that they're clearly not going to contribute anything to Social Security, so we're all screwed. We better bring in the Mexicans. We need somebody that with a set of balls.
So is the problem they're just offended that they don't have enough, black people on Friends, or there's no one that's like trans-abled?
Yeah, it's all of it. The show's just not inclusive enough. It's too white, which people made that joke even back then. But I guess there's some gay humor. But I'm sure it's just something innocent, like Chandler and Joey, like, oh, we have to accidentally kiss or something like that. And I mean, honestly, you can even tell with these people, they're just out of their friggin' mind. I can't figure out anything that they want. But I guess again, these are the same people that had a yellow-scaled wingless dragonkin speak at Google. So I guess that's par for the course.
Yeah, that's just one of the other symptoms of the liberal progressivism, I think, slowly manifesting itself into a global mental disorder.
I wonder, if Aziz Ansari was white, do you think he'd have been accused? Maybe he was only accused because of his dark skin.
Oh, well, yeah, that, of course. I mean, white people never get accused of promoting misogyny or racism or xenophobia for any reason. In fact, that's actually the terms.
Well, I really think that's how their mindset is everything's got to be about race. So clearly, this white woman would only accuse a man of color because that fits the racial stereotype of the aggressive man of color who's a barbarian who doesn't know any better. Really, he's the victim in all this.
Oh, that goes without saying. I mean, clearly, just the fact that he's being accused is symptomatic of prejudice in this country.
Let's see if there's anything else major that happened this week. I mean, I guess the week did start off with Oprah, her run for president, I guess, which, sure, why not? I mean, she had a great TV show that introduced the world to Dr. Phil. Clearly, that makes you qualified to be president.
Didn't she introduce Dr. Oz, too? Because if she has Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil, I mean, that's, at least half the FDA right there.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's anything that Dr. Phil prescribed. Actually, either one that prescribes is FDA approved, which is their whole little gimmick. But no, there's no way Oprah could ever actually win. If you go through and look at her history, she just did that stupid talk show for so many years. She had so many interactions with, is this a dangerous sex cult? Or is this going to kill your kids and stuff like that? Well, I would think it would sink you. Then again, Trump's got a lot of weird crap in his past that still seem to go on, but I don't know. You think she's going to make it? You think that old Oprah there will become the next president of the United States?
No, I don't think Oprah is going to be the one. I think it's going to be a sort of a pipe dream for a while. We might see it build up momentum for a couple of years. I mean, because you think about Oprah, I mean, can you really think of anyone who's more emblematic of the current liberal towel? Because we have an African-American, closeted lesbian woman who has fought, with mental illness and weight disorder her entire life. And, I mean, she just strikes off all the things in the checklist. I mean, she pretty much nails all of them. If she were a dwarf, it would be perfect.
She needs to be crippled or something, but, yeah, that's true. She was, a rape victim, all that stuff. I don't want to denigrate her. I mean, she's a heck of a success story. She's something that only happens in America. You will never find someone like her in Europe who came from abject nothingness and became a billionaire. It is impressive, but I also think she's smart enough that she doesn't want to waste it. She's got a lot of money, and she probably doesn't need the headache.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I don't think she has the willpower to do it. I think Donald Trump, obviously, he's been planning a presidential run for 20, 30 years. I mean, it's something he's been wanting to do. He's got that stick-to-itiveness to it, that this thing has been planned out for a long time. I think Oprah, I mean, she might do it just as sort of a momentary reaction. But for a presidential run, I mean, you think about all the things that go into that. You've got to have, years and years of planning and strategizing and working on these policy platforms and having just a full slate of agenda items. And I think she might have 2 or 3 topics that she might be kind of in the loop on. But, identity politics does not equal global politics. It does not equal international monetary politics. And the thing is, that's a big difference between Donald Trump and Oprah Winfrey. If you actually go back and read The Art of the Deal, you can see that Donald Trump has been basically like an Ayn Rand superhero, because he's been fighting the government since the 1970s. In fact, if the New York municipal government wasn't as corrupt and shady and completely inept, we probably wouldn't even have Donald Trump. It's a complete reaction to government overreach and the bureaucracy and, really just not being able to do anything except, take people's money. So I just don't think Oprah really has enough of the full presidential, I guess, agenda topics to go through. I mean, she can speak. I think she'd be a good ambassador. I mean, she might be a good, cabinet appointee. But as far as having the complete presidential toolkit, I just don't think she has enough gas in the tank.
No, but she has the benefit that she didn't come from a shithole. And that's always something that helps you if you want to run for president, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times I've heard liberals describe Alabama and Georgia as shitholes over the years. How many times they've called literally the blackest and most diverse part of the country festering shitholes.
Well, that's just how they work, It's one thing to say that America has systemic racism that is oppressive and evil, that everything that's not New York or LA is a shithole, and flyover states, you don't need to listen to them. But heaven forbid you call sub-Saharan Africa where the third leading cause of death is diarrhea, making it an actual literal shithole. You wouldn't want to call that place a shithole. Oh no, not at all.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing what the argument there is. He's not saying that the people themselves are, particularly shitty. He's basically just saying they have really bad infrastructure, they have corrupt governments, and they just have a really bad sort of national planning going on there. And I think hardly any of those things are debatable questions at this point. Haiti, yeah, I'm going to go on a limb here and say it's a very poorly managed country. It's a country where I read a report that only about 50% of the population has access to a sewer. So literally half the country doesn't have a toilet. I am going to side with the president on that one, that if any country could be rightly called a quote-unquote shithole or a shithouse, it would be the country where 1 out of 2 people don't have toilets.
I know, but that just makes him, he's just a racist for pointing that out. He's a racist because he doesn't want to use race as a basis for bringing people into the United States of America. Up is down, men or women, girls or boys, and people that don't want to look at race are called racist. The postmodernists have truly had their day, haven't they?
It's just a lot. When was the last time anyone's actually looked at the actual numbers on who's actually immigrating to America? Because, last time I looked, a large majority of them are actually Middle Eastern. They're from India. They're from places where, well, I guess you could rightly call these places shitholes too. I mean, if not, infrastructurally, then at least as far as terms of their political bureaucracy is concerned.
They know what they're saying. They don't care anymore. They're just done. They're just going to bleat like lambs. Because you're going to see that the youth is always like, obviously the next generation. Young conservatives they're the punk rock kids now. They're being the badasses who don't give a crap and they're taking it to you. And the liberals are the ones that need safe spaces that they need to accuse the leftists of most leftist professors of being racist. And then they're surprised when when they can't debate. They just yell. They just say things. They just repeat, like pro wrestlers who don't understand what their catchphrases mean. They're just saying words that they've been programmed to say, and their brains work differently. And that's why they'll ultimately lose, like we've kind of gone over all show.
Yeah, you can only fight objective reality for so long before eventually you gotta throw in the towel. I love the fact that today being a renegade and being controversial means believing the First Amendment is an absolute right, or believing that biological sciences are more important than social constructs. That's all you have to do to be labeled a heretic in this day and age.
Yeah, it's funny that the right wing is the ones that want everybody to say whatever they want, and they're the ones arguing for science over blind faith.
It's a crazy world. The polls keep shifting. Maybe 30 or 40 years from now we're living in that Republican theocracy. Maybe things will be different. But it seems now that it's just, the new boss, same as the old boss. That the liberals, I think, they don't have political power. They certainly have cultural power. They run the media, they run the entertainment industry, they run academia. And, I don't know. It's just it's a really weird time to be out there. But I really do fear for civil liberties. I think as much as I despise the hardline conservatives and Republicans, and I think they're both two buttholes on the same orifice. I do feel a little bit safer with the conservatives as far as not touching First Amendment issues. But with liberals, the Ninth Circuit Court in California, I mean, just absolutely terrifies me. The things they could press through.
Yeah, no, it's, again, I don't know if we're all doomed. Maybe this is what it always has been. And I do always do recount that Aaron Burr murdered Alexander Hamilton, so maybe we are a little more civil still today and isn't all doom and gloom. I would hope that these people don't get entrenched in power for too long. But, if they do, then maybe that just means that, we get the government that we deserve when it's all said and done, and maybe this is what we'll all deserve. And if that's the case, then I'm just going to look at it all and laugh and just cry, weeping, know that there's no future. But at least if you're going to go down, if you're going to die, you might as well die at the peak of civilization.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, you talk about Rome, everyone is absolutely obsessed with how Rome fell. They never actually talk about what made it a great country to begin with. And you got to remember, you know, Caligula, he took over the entire Holy Roman Empire, or its analog, I forget what the official terminology was. And this was a guy who named his horse a consul and declared war on the ocean. So this was the guy calling all the shots. He was the leader of the country, the most powerful army on the earth, you know, the greatest democracy the earth had seen at that point. So you had this guy with syphilis who is literally insane, running everything. And you know what? The empire still lasts another 400 years. So, you know, if they can do that, I got hope for America to last at least another 50.
As long as it lasts long enough for me to live through it. That's all I really need. If they want to just give me some bread and circuses, but I get to enjoy my time here on God's green earth, all right, I guess I'll have to go with it.
You know, one of the things I'm really looking forward to is watching the gradual age for Social Security go up incrementally every year so that I never actually get it. Like, I'll die like at 92 and the cutoff will be 93.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm never touching that stuff. I'll work till the day I die and probably be watched by my Google Home, Amazon, Alexa robot that will report everything I do.
Mm-hmm. Or we can just import more people from third world countries to do it. That'll be our tax base.
Yeah, you know, look, as long as somebody's watching, all we're doing is importing more people to do jobs that we're making robots do. So I'm not really sure what's going on here. We're just build the robots to take care of the super elite, I guess.
Oh, yeah, you touched on a major issue there. I mean, that's going to be like, forget all the stuff we're talking about now about racism and sexism. That is going to be the huge political firebrand in a couple of years from now is automation. Because right now we're already seeing, you know, the automatons, you know, they've already taken over industry. You know, there's been so much blame placed on illegal immigrants for destroying American industry and NAFTA. But, you know, you've seen report after report that says really the real culprit for why there's been such a loss of American industrial jobs has been because of the mechanization of those jobs. You have computers, you got robots, basically replacing flesh and blood workers. And now we're seeing it move from industrialization to the service industry. So if you're a guy who's working at, you know, McDonald's, or even if you're someone who's working, you know, a travel agent, someone actually requires like a college education, 30 years from now, you're going to be obsolete.
Yeah, again, I guess we're all just counting down. This is just the inevitability of humanity reaching its final last grasp as we send the robots off into space, and we all look longingly at them as they conquer the new worlds, and we all dig around in the mud like the apes that we always have been.
You know, that reminds me of a film from 1969.
Which one?
I forget the name of it. I think Stanley Kubrick directed it. Planet of the Apes. That was it.
Oh, okay. That's kind of what I thought of for a second, but I'm like, did Kubrick do that? Nah, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I didn't think that was 2001: A Space Odyssey or anything. But
Well, I mean, we call that Ric Flair's Music the Movie.
damn right you do. Damn right. Anyways, I think that's a good way to conclude the initial episode here of Human Wreckage at halfguarded.com. Mr. Swift, I want to thank you for doing this and setting all this up, so to speak. Sign off, tell people what's going on, plug stuff, you know how this stuff works. Have at it.
Well, you know, what can I say? Halfguarded.com, halfguarded.com, halfguarded.com. You've been a good home to me. I write for like 12 or 13 different websites, so it's just too long for me to go into all of them. But you can find me online at Google. I guess probably the easiest way to do it. Just type my name in there and you'll find stuff. But yeah, if you like the program, you want to see us get into more deeper political, socio-economic issues, particular topics, let us know. We'd love to cover them in depth.